Good morning, Wade.
Morning, Rob. How's life treating you this fine day?
Well, it's a very productive and good day for me out here. It's actually coming to an end. It's 11:35 here in Metro Manila. How about you, my friend?
It is it is dawn here in California, and I am just starting to get my day together.
Mm-hmm.
Coffee hasn't even kicked in yet,
I hate it when that happens.
but yeah, always up for talking shop.
Yep. And for those of you who don't know, Magic.TV Presents is different from our regular Magic.TV episodes because in Magic.TV Presents, this is just me and Wade sharing our experiences with the public, just amongst ourselves. We basically let other people know what's going on with us, and we talk about various topics. And today we're going to be talking about talismans. But before we go any further, we got to give salutation to the big man, King Belial of the Goetia. And just going to pimp this out a bit. This is the thing that Wade and I did together. That in 2022, darkest year of my life, I consecrated this in 14 karat gold medallion of Belial. I don't know if you guys can see it. And that was my foray into the 40s. But before we go any further, since we're gonna pimp out the boss, we're gonna pimp out the patron of our show. There is one thing I did want to ask you, which was there's been a lot of written stuff about Belial. Some of them say that Belial is a devil, others say he's a demon, and some actually say he's a fallen angel. So from that viewpoint, Wade, I wanted to get your own 2 cents. What do you think about it?
People have said all those things about me too. Honestly, I always, even with whether it's people, angels, demons, gods, whatever, I tend to go with the way they act.
Mm-hmm.
And what the hell do humans know about angels and demons?
Yep.
Most of it's stuff they've read in books or seen in movies. That one with was it The Prophecy? Mm-hmm. When he was the guy was talking about, anytime there's an angel in the Bible, it's because God sent him to kill somebody. Would you ever really want to see an angel?
Mm-hmm.
And humans make these adorable little angel cards with cute cherubs on them and positive statements for the day. Maybe not. If you did those the way actual angels are described in the Bible, with just wheels within wheels and eyes all over them, and yeah, maybe then. But honestly, I don't like putting people in a box. So for me, he's sort of like our executive producer. He's, kind of gives us ideas for the show, makes all things possible.
Gives us that extra
big ups.
We needed, right?
Well, the thing is, it doesn't matter to me if he's an angel or a demon. I don't care.
Mm-hmm.
That's my 2 cents.
Well, to be totally honest, I'm just multitasking because I'm promoting the show on our social media channels. I've actually thought about it, and my own 2 cents on it, and of course you can fight me on this if you want, is I actually personally feel that he is a fallen angel. That's my own take, because if there's anything out there that's probably tougher than a devil or an angel or a demon, it's probably a fallen angel. Because if you look through the text, they actually say he was the first to fall after Lucifer. And we all know that Lucifer was the first of the fallen. So with that being said, I like to think that he's kind of like, one of those turncoats from the CIA who joined the other side. So he's got all that internal tech and all the juju necessary to make these things happen. But with that being said, I wanted to ask you, for the viewers out there who's curious, and they're like, this Belial guy is real serious stuff. By the way, this lovely pendant was brought to us by our friends at GOETIC Impressions, consecrated and created by them. What are some efficient ways to begin a working relationship with Belial? Because some people are like, oh, it's this Belial guy. But I'll share my takes on it, but if somebody went up to you, some mageling in your bookstore, and says, hey, Wade, I want to work with Belial, what would you tell them?
I always start out with an interview.
Mm-hmm.
So I tell people, here's the thing, do your homework, find out what he likes, find out these other things, get him into your temple, call him up, get him on the horn, and ask him straight up. You're like, okay, how do you prefer to be worked with? Do you like to have like a physical object that you work through? Do you prefer to have just, scrying, just using a mirror? How do you prefer it? Because then it kind of fine tunes it for their preferences. Because I have some that I've made masks for that really do work out well in terms of just kind of having a permanent fixture for them. Mm-hmm. It's more of a fetish than a talisman, I guess. But if we're talking about making magical objects, a fetish falls right into that same thing.
Definitely. Because, like, I don't know if I showed you guys again. This is like the old man and me talking. This is the one that you and I created together. This is my 14-karat gold talisman for Belial that I personally have on his statue. And one thing I've figured out when working with Belial is if you want to work with somebody like that, you got to resonate. Okay, you got to resonate with the spirit that you're trying to work with. Because, for example, if Belial is some sort of badass mafia don of the underworld and you're a weakling, you think he's going to give you the time of day? So one thing I've observed in working with that spirit is make yourself worthy of their attention. All right. So, example, if you're working with a Venusian spirit, all right, then you have to work with your own personal beauty. If you're working with a Martian spirit, you got to up the testosterone in you. So if you're dealing with something that's big, like a king, or something like to the extent of what Belial offers, you got to have some sort of regality to you in one way or the other. Because a king will talk to another king. If not, he's just like, hey, don't fuck with me. You know what I mean?
I've also noticed that when I'd summon them, when I was just, a fresh mageling, mm-hmm. I got a lot less respect from them. Mm-hmm. But as you progress, when you work your way through adepthood and knowledge and conversation and making your crossing and all that, the more you level up, the more they become almost worshipful, where they're honored to be in your presence. Because if you're more of a magician of substance, they definitely want, because you have more to offer at that point. When they work with you, your essence is a whole lot more valuable to them than it was when you were just some punk-ass kid.
Good point. And one thing I like to tell people, too, when you're trying to work with these spirits, like we've talked about this in previous episodes, there's the shortcut approach and there's the long cut approach. I'd actually tell people that the more high ranking of a spirit you're working with, the more you put into it, the better of a response you're going to get. So, like, since Belial was a king, it says in the Goetia that his seal should ideally be made out of gold. So, I mean, this wasn't exactly cheap, but the time, the energy, the effort I put into making this, not just to have just a physical foundation of it being put into gold. And then the fasting, the research, the coordination between you and me, the abstinence, that's all fueling the magic. Then the timing, we want to do it on the day, on the hour. Now, there will never ever be anything as a perfect evocation, but one of the things we actually can do is increase the odds of our success. And I'd like to say that, I have zero regrets on working with Belial, because he has, in effect, given us everything we asked for. I mean, look at what the show we have now. We've made some great friends. We've gotten sponsors, been given books. We're talking to people. We're growing. We're getting better. These are all the things that Belial offers. But all I'm trying to say is that if you want to work with any kind of spirit, it could be Belial. Heck, it could be Furcas, the one at the very bottom of the 72. You've got to resonate with their energy in one way or the other. So, like, I don't know if you've had this happen to you, but have you ever had these young magelings go up to you and say, no, I want to talk to the most powerful of the demons, and they haven't done shit yet? What would you usually tell them?
Do it.
Then what happens?
Nothing humbles you like experience. And honestly, sometimes you never know. I had an apprentice that he reminded me so much of myself in my early teens And I decided I was going to be the kind of teacher that I wanted at that age. And he kept saying, okay, I want more. I want more. I want the harder things. I want more. I want these initiations. I want these experiences. I want to, call up these spirits. And I hit him with everything, and he drank it like orange juice. He was ready. He soaked everything in.
Well, if
And he went and
go ahead.
well, he also went insane and died. But until that point, he was doing really, really well.
All right, so it's basically was doing well all until he went ape shit and then jumped off the
Which
cliff.
was entirely a human thing. Had nothing to do with the spirits or any of that other stuff. It's just one of the things you have to ask yourself when you start start yourself down these journeys is, what would you do if you could do anything? And that answer is going to be different for everybody. But some people are going to be like, oh, I would solve world hunger. Or other people like, I would become a mafia boss. Or I would take all the drugs. Or I would create a huge business. And, so it really depends when it goes from one person to another. And that is what is going to get you in the end. Because when you can do anything, sometimes you end up just doing things that do you in.
All right, so let's go to the topic at hand. We've given enough props to Belial. I'm just gonna, before we go to the topic on talismans itself, I'm just gonna tell, for those of you who think you've got the juice to talk to the big man, then give it a try. But I'll just tell you, it's like, imagine approaching a mafia don. Like, you and I are walking down the streets of San Francisco. We know there's some Don Wade of Fillmore. And just two nobodies just approach him. What's most likely to happen? On a good day, nothing. On a bad day, his Gambinos are going to fuck us up. So if you're going to approach any kind of spirit that has any kind of higher ranking, the very least you can do is show it respect. Because at the end of the day, you're going to be doing business with these things. Now, here's the funny thing. People have actually asked me, do you worship Belial? And I was, of course not. No, not at all. I don't worship him at all. I give props to him. I respect him. And I wouldn't want to piss him off. But I've gone on record when I say I do not worship him. Because think of it like he's my arms dealer. You know what I mean? If you're supplying me with under-the-table firearms, I'm not going to make a shrine to that guy. But I know that I'm going to say, hey, this is somebody I'd like to have on my good list. How about you, Wade? Is that an approach you do, or do you do more of a devotional approach?
If you think about it, when something you had said earlier about like the whole fallen KGB thing or the fallen CIA thing, it's kind of like with, remember the cancer man from the X-Files?
Yeah, him.
The guy that he said that, we had fallen from the purer faith. Well, the thing is, the fallen angels have advantage over angels and demons both, because they've been on both sides. They know how to play the game and they know how to cheat the game. So they're kind of like the fallen Jedi. Same thing there. They know how to use both sides of that. So yeah, that I would go with it the same way that you're like, okay, maybe I don't have this guy's, personal address, but I can set up a meet, and I'm not going to show up empty-handed. Mm-hmm. So you show up, you bring something to the table. It's like, look, I've got a job for you. I've got some things that I need you to do. And what you need from me is participation. You need to be able to participate. You need like a foothold here to be able to do things. That's one of the things that I make the masks for. Spirit masks.
We're actually going to talk
speaking of making items.
True. We're going to talk about that in tonight's episode. So shouting out to Angelo Rossini. Thank you for showing up. So one question a lot of people like to ask us is, what is exactly the difference between a talisman and an artifact? And I have my take on it, but I'd love to hear it from you.
Well, in terms of magical items, anything you make is technically an artifact. Uh-huh. Which there's also, there's amulets, which have virtue by they have value, like a magical effect, by virtue of the material they're made out of, whether it's a specific type of wood or stone or animal hair, anything that has a specific type of energy that when your body energy circulates through this, it's kind of like a tea bag. Yep. That, when you put it in the water and the virtue circles through and it turns the water into tea. It's the same thing with your body's energy. If you're going to carry rose quartz, your energy is going to circulate through that, and you're making rose quartz tea. So there's amulets that work they just work. Once you clear them, they do the thing on their own. But talismans usually have some kind of a sigil or an engraving or something about the way that they're made, which makes them focus in a specific direction. It's more like air magic, that it's on a particular, like if you look at the GOETIC sigils or the Abramelin squares or voodoo veves or anything like that, it's usually there's a sigil that's made that is to take that in a particular, basically to write out what it does.
Good point.
And then you have fetishes, which are a object that has power by virtue of a spirit that lives inside it. Well, it's usually made in the shape of a spirit, like a statue or a mask or a doll or something.
Well, if you're going to add
that's
that,
my pick.
What about a defixio?
A what?
A defixio, defixiones. You've never heard
Not
of that?
familiar with that term. No, not by that name.
Okay. Defixio is basically, let's just look up it's basically a curse tablet. In other words, it is any kind of object that has basically a landmine, the equivalent of a magical landmine attached to it. And some people have asked, is that because there's something inside of it activating it, or is it a particular amount of energy? I like to go as far as to say both. Now, the jury's still out, though, on if a talisman is actually an object that is containing a spirit or not, or is it containing some sort of...
It can be.
Spirit. But for those of you guys can make up your own definitions if you want. I'm personally of the belief that a talisman is really something that houses a spirit or is a residence of a spirit. But the next thing we want to discuss is, well, if that's the case, how can we create these talismans? So in your history of magic, Wade, what has been some of the means in which you've used to create magical talismans?
Well, with talismans, and to go back to a curse tablet, that sounds like it would be a talisman, that it would be something that you write out what's going to happen. And if it was me, I would make one on clay and put it someplace where they would step on it so it would break. And that would kind of release that onto them. Like you're saying, like a landmine. But usually I just take whatever the appropriate material is that kind of brings the amulet aspect into it, and then engrave the sigil or the spirit's lamen on there. And then you just consecrate it, which is just basically blasting energy through it until it retains some.
Now, from your own point of view, though, how important are the magical correspondences in the creation of a talisman? Some people will just fuck around and do it on paper, but others will really like plan the time of Saturn at the hour of Saturn, the day of Saturn on lead on a black Saturday with the ink of a black hen. You know what I mean? So from your point of view, are you of the belief that it should be strictly adhered, or are you of the belief of you could be a little bit eclectic about it?
In my experience, every element that you add to it is like adding spell points.
Very true.
Say if you're like, okay, I want to take this particular type of wood that I've cut from that tree on the stroke of midnight on this particular day when the stars are doing this, and I take the thing and I carve it with a virgin blade, and I'm doing all of and everything you add to that makes it more it adds more focus, adds greater focus to it. So by the time you're ready to charge this thing, it's already very highly focused. Option B, you could just like write it on the back of a BART ticket and feed it into the machine, so it goes into the thing and disappears into the system, which I've done. Which I have done. It really depends on how much time you have, on how much energy you want to put into it, and whether or not it's appropriate.
Because
so if I mean, sometimes there's ways you can just draw a sigil right on a person.
Because
it doesn't have to be on a specific hour.
I read in a very interesting book called Circles of Power by John Michael Greer that he said there that in the creation of magical talismans, you need to be very, very careful with how you handle them and how you care for them, because basically from that book, take it or leave it, when you create a magical talisman, you're basically imbuing it with a portion of your own power, and if you lose it, you're basically losing a chunk of your power in the process. Now, from your experiences, Wade, is this something you agree with, or is that just basically New Age mumbo jumbo?
It grows back.
It grows back.
I've actually done some magical experiments where you put part of yourself into an object, pretty much for protection. I don't recommend it because the effects on me were almost catastrophic.
Whoa.
But I was very well protected. Imagine if you know how the Egyptians used to use the canopic jars. They would put their heart in one jar and their liver in another jar and all that. Imagine doing that while you're alive.
Yikes.
They're very well protected. Very well protected. You, on the other hand, are going to have a long recovery time.
Wow. So it's basically like reading Horcrux from Harry Potter.
Yeah, actually, now that I think about it, and if that had been out at the time when I did this in the 90s, I probably wouldn't have done it. But I did learn. Well, I learned a great deal.
I do have a question, though, about the maintenance then of these. So, like, example, like one very, very, very popular means of creating talismans is, of course, creating goetic sigils, right? Would we agree on that? Okay, so let's say I've already had this talisman, and although we won't go into a primer on Goetia right now, but we've already had this talisman made in the name of a spirit. Obviously, I can't just literally engrave a spirit's name and say, all right, guess what? The spirit Baratzabel is here. There is, of course, a certain level of ceremony and pre-work that needs to be done to imbue it and consecrate it. But the next thing I'm going to ask is, how do we use this once it's been consecrated? Do we just wear it? Do we use it as a means of linking to the spirit? How would you personally do it?
I always use it sort of like the way you'd use a scrying mirror, except you don't gaze into it. It's kind of like an intercom. So you have a direct link into his office. Maybe he's got, thousands of these intercoms going out to different people that are working with him. But the better yours is, the more likely he's more likely to pay attention to you. So if he's got, the one on the wall that's just a scrap of paper with a thing written on there in Sharpie, maybe it was quick and dirty, and he's just like, I'm not going to take that call this time. I'm going to let it go to voicemail. I'm going to get back to him. But if it was actually, from someone that was very important to him, that might be, someone who had leveled up and is just like, yep, I don't have time to do the whole thing. I'm just going to do this quick. Yeah, he's more likely to answer that call. So I think it's the more time and energy you put into it, the more likely it is to work just to get his attention.
Because
that makes sense.
I read somewhere in some books about feeding these, that it's not just enough that you create this, that you've got to like one thing we know about the big man Belial is that he's pretty astute about his desire for offerings. He wants offerings. So I would take that as a means of you need to feed the talisman to keep it active. From your own experiences, Wade, how would you go about feeding these talismans? Or would you completely forego it completely?
cats are going nuts.
They must be
Yeah,
on top.
actually, the cats want feeding, but it's easier to feed the cats. Usually, with these, again, that's something that I would defer to the spirit on. Like, oh, do you want a shrine? Do you want me to burn some incense for you in the mornings, or only when we're working together? Do you want me to, like? I had one. He wanted me to just pile pocket change. You know, like at the end of the day when you take your change out, he just wanted a pile of coins in front of his statue, and just whenever you're getting the change out of your pockets for laundry, just throw them on the thing. It really depends on what they want, what they like, and whatever turns them on, literally, turns them on. It makes it easier to work with them because it's what they want. And the books will say one thing, but honestly, the books are from centuries ago, so you never know what's. Centuries ago, I don't know what I would have wanted.
Mm-hmm.
Piles of raw bacon or something. I have no idea. But today, bring me coffee.
I remember back in the day you told me about one nincompoop mage that made a deal with one of the spirits that every week he would leave a gold coin for it. How did that turn out for that mage?
Oh, God. I did not get follow-up from that one, but that seemed to be a very bad idea. Because even if you could say, well, technically a Sacagawea is a gold coin because it's golden.
Mm-hmm.
But even then, you're leaving one every week. So you have this whole pile of money that eventually is just going to start to
get attention.
You're going to have to do something with it at some point. And if you miss a week, I don't know what the penalty would be, but it just seemed like a bad deal to make.
That's a good thing that you mentioned about penalty. So like for spirits like these, because like part of our agreement was we would give this guy publicity. That's why we do it through the show. But what would happen if we decided to stop the show? Would we all burst into flames? I mean, from your point of view. And by the way, for those of you curious, I'm not asking Wade this because I don't know the answer. I'm actually asking it to kind of like educate the of the show of this very interesting topic, because sometimes people might make a talisman and they don't realize it might be a lifelong commitment, or is this something that like when we stop feeding it, it deactivates on its own? So what would happen if we decided to just stop?
Well, the best that could happen for you is, like, best case scenario is you just don't get any further benefits from it. Say if you have, if you got one to get you a house and you got the house and then you're like, okay, I'm just not going to work with this guy anymore. Well, you're just kind of, you're not getting anything further from the guy. Worst case scenario is he takes away everything that he gave you.
Ouch.
That could be bad. But usually, in my experience, if you quit working with them, you just don't get those benefits in the future. Now, the absolute worst case scenario is if they go out of their way to make the rest of your life a big pile of shit, which I've only seen that happen one time, and they had it coming.
Do share what happened with that case.
Oh, that was the guys that did that Enochian working to charge a lunar talisman. Yeah, that whole.
Idiots.
Yeah. Oh my God, I could not believe that. I'm just glad I was not in the splash zone for that one.
Well, I do have a question. Ken, when you're creating magical talismans, should you have them just be of pure intent for like one planet or one energy, or can you kind of like mix match them? Like you could mix like Mars and Saturn to have the ultimate fuck you talisman, you know what I mean? Or is it better to have one Mars talisman and one Saturn talisman?
No, you can mix those. Okay. And it doesn't even have to be Mars or Saturn. You can say, I'm going to pick the appropriate zodiac sign or a spirit, anything that's a blend of different energies. You can use those. That's fine. Even if you wanted to mix to do specifically planetary stuff, and you say, okay, I'm just going to throw a little bit of this, a little bit of this, a little bit of this. You'd have to really fine tune what you're going to do on it. If you could be like, okay, I'm going to do it, it should all be for the same purpose. That's definitely, because if they're like, well, I have Saturn work I need to do and I have Venus work I need to do, I'm just going to do them both on the same talisman. I don't recommend that.
Yeah, neither do I.
It should be for the same specific end.
Well, you know,
but to that end, anything you want to do should all go off at the same time.
I actually like to tell people when creating talismans, especially in my magic classes, is that the day in which you create the talisman is the overall energy, but the hour in which you finish it or start it is the kind of like the accent to it. So, for example, if I want to be a badass sniper in war, I would make a talisman of Mars on the day of Mars, but I would start the workings at the hour of Saturn. So basically, I'm a good warrior, but I'm really good at freaking killing people, for example. Because, of course, Saturn has a lot to do with death. Now, I could be a great warrior and not kill anyone. You know what I mean? I could be a very, like an Aikido guy. But if you really want to, like, mix and match energies when creating talismans, the timing of the hour of the day and the day itself will directly, how do I say, affect the way the talisman is turned out. Which brings me to a very important question. What would happen if somebody got their hands on a talisman that you created?
Well, I guess I'm going to assume that you're talking about just a standard talisman that's not like a fetish or something else. Because an amulet, you could use, I mean, anybody could use one. No matter who made it. Because it's just the material that it's made of. Mm-hmm. But with an amulet or with a talisman that conveys a particular energy, I would assume that then they would get the benefits from that, because I've made talismans for other people.
Yeah.
And had them carry them. So usually I need some kind of participation from them so that they're kind of bonded to it. But yeah, they would be able to use it. Now, something with a spirit inside would be a whole different animal. Literally, right. They would have to have some kind of a relationship with that spirit, or else you just kind of have a feral animal in your house.
True, very true. Now, because I wanted to ask you, is there any possibility that if you made a talisman or a fetish or an artifact or some sort of amulet, can that be used against you in magical warfare?
It could, if you had used like parts of like your own hair, your blood or something, if you had done that, if there's some link directly to you on it, but it wouldn't be the best way to go about getting at somebody. I wouldn't be too concerned, because I mean, I've made magical items for people my whole life. You make them something, and I don't think that there's any way to. You could do it the same way you could do it with someone's footprint or their shirt, and it'd be a lot easier to get a hold of, Rob's footprint than it would be to get a hold of his Belial talisman.
Very true.
And that footprint would be specifically you, because it's your foot. I wouldn't have to fight through some other energy that's on it.
That's a very interesting point, because actually some mages here in the rural parts of the Philippines, when you're walking in the beach, they actually chase after your footprint so that they can do shit to you. So it's one thing you need to be extra careful of. But the one thing I wanted to ask you is, let's say you were done with the talisman. It did its purpose. It's done. Would you be the kind of guy who would store it in your closet of oddities, or would you disenchant it?
If it's something that I might use again, I'll hang on to it. Because I've got pant loads of different talismans and things that I've used in the past. Older versions of my magical tools, because I upgrade those all the time. Every time I get cool new ideas for magical tools, I keep the old ones. I make the new ones, and I use those. But yeah, it's if it's something that's been useful in the past, I tend to hang on to it.
And
If I wanted to get rid of it, if it was something that was specific to this one thing that I was doing, I would probably just not so much burn it because I didn't want to release the energy and let it go away, but I would bury it or put it in the ocean or something, so that it kind of is just returned to the earth.
So that's your basic disenchant. Is there any kind of rituals as a Thelemite that you personally adhere to disenchant magical objects, so that you can kind of make sure that they can't cause any more mischief?
No.
Nothing that you
do? No. And there's other times that I've put things someplace, like say if I had done some prosperity work with a talisman, I would take it someplace like a gross part of town and bury it there and let them have some prosperity energy.
Because from my own point of view, one of the things that I've done with this talisman, believe it or not, I've brought this because Belial's about power. He's about we were going to get to that, Angelo. Actually, I was going to get to that next. He's about power. He's about authority. He's about being kind of like a mafia boss. So I've actually taken this to the military bases. I've taken this to the office of government installations, like the mayor's office and stuff like that. Not necessarily the mayor of the city I'm in, but I've taken this to places where the power is there. You know what I mean? Because if you could even get it to siphon off a bit of that, example, for this kind of energy for Belial, if I could be wearing it when I shake the hand of somebody like Vladimir Putin, even if I'm an American, come on, let's not deny the fact that guy's powerful. You know what I mean? I wouldn't want to be his enemy. So, that's something that can definitely soak up into this. And I'm sure that Belial would like that. So we're actually going to be going now to the topic of masks. That you said you actually made masks. And Angela Rossini is actually asking, can we see one of the masks made by Wade? I don't know if he's open to doing that. What's the significance of you making a mask for any kind of spirit?
The masks, I have one in my room. It's kind of attached to the wall. I almost took it down to bring it in. There's another one that I'm making for Belial for himself, but it's not really in a state where I can show the thing yet, but I can describe it. Basically, what I did for the first one was I took I just used a plastic mask model from a craft store. Yeah. They have the small faces that are 3D shaped, and I took a piece of stretchy cloth. I think it was just t-shirt material of the appropriate colors, and I painted the spirit's sigil on it, and I just kind of glued it down around the face, and then I hung it up. So what you have is the sigil, but right in the middle of the sigil is a 3D face coming out of it. So the effect of that, and this is what the spirit had described to me. He described how to make this whole thing. And what the effect of that is, you walk by and you just talk to it because it's a face. It's a human face, and now when you talk to it, you say oh yeah, I need to know about this, and then you just listen. And at first, it was really uncanny how you just say you ask it a question and you just get the answer. This was Siri before Siri, and I'm making another one now. Only I did it. The plaster's drying. I actually did a mold of my own face that I'm going to put this whole mask on. So it's going to be considerably larger than the other one. I might need a frame on it.
But here's a question I want to ask. If it works as a Siri, what happens if you put it on?
Well, I don't know. I may have to try that.
Interesting, don't you think?
Because this one is made on. The other one was too small to put on. This one, I may actually be able to put it on and just have the cloth drape over the rest of my head.
Because
they don't do the show like that. Because that sounds like this kind of thing you would use for full trance possession.
Very true. Because it made me wanted to ask you, let's say I have a very cool Anubis mask there that was mysteriously sent to me by somebody I don't even know. And let's say I wanted, from your point of view, to make that mask as a means of putting on the God face, as Jack Grill would say. In other words, associating myself with Anubis, so that every time I place on that mask, Anubis and I are one. What kind of workings, rituals, or anything that would you recommend I do to empower that mask with that kind of ability, so that when I wear the mask, I and the God are one?
That would be the kind of thing that I would do for a group ritual.
Uh-huh.
If somebody there needed to speak with Anubis, because full transpossession is no joke. It's a very advanced technique. It's, Crowley talked about, or in the Golden Dawn, they talked about the assumption of a god form, which is not quite the same. This is more like a voodoo thing, where they would have the riders would come and just fully possess you,
Yeah,
and speak through you, but also do things through you.
yeah.
So it wouldn't really be of value to you, because you kind of go away. So it would be something that you would do in a group setting.
To benefit the group, because like, what's the point of being possessed by a god if it's just you and him alone in the room, right? Fascinating, because I'm familiar of the theory of the horse in transpossession, that you allowed yourself to be ridden by the spirit. But like, I've also learned through Jack's wonderful PGM course about the aspect of putting on the God face, that as you actually identify as the God, you can come in theurgy, you can actually compel not just the God you're talking to, but associated gods to listen to you. It's like, example, if I were to walk into, let's say, the old ancient ways and say, "Hi, I'm Rob," nobody would pay attention to me there. But if I went in there saying, "I am Wade Long," and Wade is speaking through me, then all of them like, "Dude, Wade, is that you? Oh shit, you left your bag of you know what here." You know what I mean? So it kind of like gives a certain level of authority to what we're doing. But you said something about full transpossession. Is this something dangerous, or is this something that you can easily learn to do?
It's something you can easily learn to do, and it's dangerous.
Okay.
I mean, it's easy to learn to make dynamite. So, it's easy to kind of ruin your whole day with it. So I've seen people that, and that's kind of the difference between the Wicca traditions and ceremonial magic, is they tend to go big with lots of energy and lots of motion and power and very little focus. Kind of like if you're painting a wall, they're throwing buckets, whereas the ceremonial magician they're using the very fine rollers.
Yeah.
To make sure it goes exactly where it's. So they're both getting coverage, and honestly, if you could combine those techniques, you'd have some real juju going. But I've seen them doing the full transpossession of the god or goddess and speaking through them as a high priest or priestess. So yeah, I've actually seen it quite a bit, and it is something that you need to have some experience before you really kind of get into that sort of thing.
Would the use of magical masks be something that you could overlap with Liber or Astarte?
Yeah. In fact, Liber Astarte would be the perfect way to get your mask made. Because the more you work with this particular entity, the more you get to know about it. And you can even have them kind of participate. Just like, no, that's why, I was thinking like, yeah, I should go ahead and make another one of these masks. And I got his input on, and he's just like, no, make a mask, a mold of your own face for this. And I'm like, really? At least I don't have any hair. So, but yeah, so that you get some input from them on it.
Well, this has been a really fascinating topic that, like, a lot of people can chew on, about the creation of magical artifacts, especially about talismans. One thing I'd like to notice, like, I liked how you said throughout the session, and I agree with it, that like it kind of gives you a direct line to the spirit that you're working with.
Yeah.
But like, one thing I also like to tell you is that, remember, at the end of the day, you're still working with the spirit sometimes people have this bad habit of just surrendering complete control, and that's when too many bad things happen. So, like example, if I'm working with a gun runner, I'm not gonna give him the keys to my house. You know what I mean? He might end up like hiding stashes there. Hello, Diane Frazier. Welcome to the show. But the thing I'm trying to say is that the most important thing to keep in mind is you got to keep your own authority and identity in check. Because if you're that kind of person that's going to give too much control of yourself over to the spirit you're working with, you're just going to end up like a village bicycle for the spirit world that like everybody will get a ride, and you might not even be able to tell the own voices in your head from your own voice. So at the end of the day, tread intelligently, I'd like to say, when doing these.
Yeah.
I'm of the belief also that you shouldn't really have too many talismans, because it's like, although I think Clifford Hartland Lowe will kill me for saying this because he's like the talisman mage. I mean, one book that I really loved working with and creating talismans was the Picatrix. Have you ever worked with that?
I haven't.
Very amazing stuff. And we should have what's his name? We should have Clifford back on it, because when I started working with the Picatrix, he was the guy who was kind of like coaching me. And funny thing is, you guys look almost identical. So it's like, it's very cool. It's very effective too. But then you have to have a working knowledge of astrology to go with it, which I have a rudimentary knowledge, but it's not enough to know like, oh, is the election. You have to understand a bit about electional astrology and like what's in midheaven and stuff like that, which just makes my nose fucking bleed. But you can actually pay people to give you that information, and they'll tell you, oh, like when I did my Picatrix working to create talismans, I actually paid him for a session to say, is the election good for this? Said, oh, you'll have this much time to do it. So it's really like timing your magic. But I will say it was incredibly effective. Incredibly effective.
Huh. Never got too into astrology or using astronomy with magic. Probably because I most of my adult life I live in cities, so I can't really go out and see the stars.
Yeah.
I made the one Jupiter talisman, which worked, actually amulet, which worked out really, really well.
Mm-hmm.
I still have it somewhere, and I've never found myself broke since then. But yeah, I haven't worked a whole lot with that.
It is something that we should talk about, especially if you want to, like, if for season 4, talk more about the Picatrix in itself. I will try to get Clifford back if he's willing to. He's a great resource on that. But it is effectively powerful stuff. One hack that I found around that is that if you know a professional astrologer who can give you the election time, it makes just like the job infinitely easier than having to learn that shit yourself. Because like, as much as I respect astrology, it reminds me too much of trigonometry. It just makes my freaking scalp itch at times. So with that being said,
I remember the Picatrix was kind of a thing that for the longest time we didn't have it in English.
Yeah,
I remember back in the 90s, I had gotten a copy in German, and I was trying to have some people translate it, because I had heard like, oh yeah, every time someone tries to translate it into English, their life goes to shit. So I managed to get a copy of it in German. I gave it to a friend of mine who knows German to translate it, and his life went to shit. And that was kind of the last time I had anyone attempt to. I still have that copy, but I just never had any. I don't know who finally put it in English.
It was John Michael.
We could have them on the show.
He was one of the people who did it. I actually have a copy of it in English. And again, it is a topic. If you're talking about talismans, the Picatrix is a very good topic. And the whole consecration, because like you have to have certain scents to go with it. Certain, like there are even like certain images you have to have printed out on parchment. It's a beautiful practice. I had a positive experience with it. So it's really something we could really delve into in future episodes.
Cool.
With that being said and done, you and I are soon going to be wrapping up season 3 at the end of probably March. As long as everything goes accordingly, I believe we are going to be graced with none other than Michael Ford, the founder of Luciferianism. He already agreed.
Nice.
So I think he's the perfect guy to close season 3 Into the Shadows. And then we're going to probably fuck around and just do a few Robin Wades for the meantime. And then season 4, we're going to launch. And I'm telling you all who are watching Magic.tv, season 4 is going to be very info and tech based. So although we're going to have some new personalities on the show, we're going to be having a lot of repeat people. We're going to be talking about specific topics. So this is going to be an amazing time for Magic.tv. We're gonna just change the game with the next season. So with that being said, this is me and Wade. Always thank each and every one of you for tuning in. Hope to see you guys when we do our season finale of season 3. Never thought we would have finished season 3, huh? And stay on till we keep going, because we're gonna be keeping on churning out some amazing content for all of you. So that being said, good night, everyone. I'm gonna end the show. Wade, don't go anywhere.